We invite you to stay tuned for the live broadcast of the Wednesday evening Bible study of the Mayfield Drive Baptist Church, located at 271 Mayfield Drive, Smyrna, Tennessee. We will now join the service.
Okay. Well, it's good to be back again this evening. And I'm going to, it may be a little short this evening because I have a proposed stopping place because of what I want to do with the rest of this particular part. And so when we get into the offerings, then I want to take each one as they go, and we'll be doing that as we go. I do have some more study guides back there if you didn't get one last week, so I have them run off. Also, I have a new answer key back in the office, so that's available for you. And I do want to make this announcement, not only for the folks here, but any that might be listening on the radio or any of our podcasts around the world. I've now got several courses that you can take that for your own knowledge. And I've set it up under the International Missionary Baptist Bible Institute. And so we're continually developing things. We have a Filipino pastor that we're supplying, that we're providing materials for. And part of that is of this as well. But so if you're interested in doing another course on your own, just let me know. And I should have made a list of them, I guess. And maybe I'll do that and I'll start advertising that. And whoever would like to take one of those courses, you'd be welcome to do that. Would not be for credit, but however, you would be presented a nice certificate of achievement or certificate of completion, for that particular course. So, all right, we're on slide number 344, I believe it is, and we'll get caught up here in just a minute. Have a little technical delays back there. So that's what happens many times. That's the reason it's just going around and around. He's trying to get something saved and then get to where we are, and it's just taking its sweet time. I don't know whether it's the internet or computers or what have you. It just seems like things are getting worse by the day. I don't know whether April's had any trouble with the internet, but I tell you, I don't know whether it's what in the times we're living in or what's going on. But anyway, things are getting sort of funky as far as electronics go. All right, so he is up and going here, and so we got the service of the tabernacle. That's where we want to pick up. I'm not sure of the page in your study guide. 16, okay. Page 16 in your study guide. So, support of the Levitical tribe. That's what we're going to pick up with. And you might be careful on some of those pages. My stapler didn't want to do real good. Yeah, and so they're liable to come apart on you if you're not careful. So anyway, but they're numbered, so you can get them back in order. All right, the priests served in the tabernacle. The priests were not supported as priests by the tithes of the people. Now I want you to notice that. The priests were not supported as priests by the tithes of the people. The tribe of Levi was supported by tithes, a tax imposed on all other tribes. The Levitical tribe had given up their part of the land to the other tribes, and as compensation, the other tribes paid tithes to support the entire tribe of Levi, not just the priests, because the priests were only a small part of the tribe. Usually we think of the tribe of Levi being just the priest, but that's not the case. As we'll see in the next slide, the tribe of Levi was made up of men, women, and children. All of the men, women, and children of the Levitical tribe were supported by the tithe. There were liars, murderers, thieves, and such like among the people of that tribe, but all of them, without regard to their character, were supported by the tithes, and not just the priests. No tithes were brought to the tabernacle. All the offerings were free will offerings, and the priests received a part of these free will offerings. Now you notice there's two offerings here. One is the tithe, and one is free will offerings. Now keep in mind, the priests were not supported by the tithes, except as what they would receive as head of the household for their own family. Okay? The other members of the tribe of Levi had other jobs to do. Only the priests were from the tribe of Levi. They were not from any other tribe, only from the tribe of Levi. However, there was a lot of care, first of all, with the tabernacle, and then later with the temple. The tribe of Levi, with the tabernacle, was responsible for the care, the setting up, the tearing down, and the transportation of the tabernacle and all of its environs. When you get to the temple, there were a lot of things that had to be taken care of in the temple. The priests didn't do it all. They did the responsibilities and the duties of their office. The rest of the things were taken care of by the remainder of the tribe of Levi. Okay, you follow me? We usually think, when we think of the tribe of Levi, we usually think just of the priest, but that's they weren't all. In fact, they were just a small part of the tribe. All right, so you got questions 82 through 89 there. So we go to the next one, the tithes brought to the storehouse. Have you ever heard the term storehouse tithing? I know Brother Bernie has. I've heard a lot of preachers use that. I don't like it because it infers something that's really not the way it really is. But in the case of the Jews, this is the way it is. Okay? The tithes were brought to the storehouse. The tithes were taken to the storehouse. Just where the storehouse was has not been revealed. But we know it was not the tabernacle. The Jews tithed their cattle and sheep And surely the tabernacle was not a stock pen. Okay? You study the tabernacle, there's not room for it. There is not room for the tabernacle for anything other than what was intended to be there. The tithes were put in the storehouse, wherever it was, and were used to support the entire tribe of Levi. Somebody had to take care of that. All right? Someone had to oversee the reception of these tithes, because the Jews had to tithe on everything. Okay? Somebody had to oversee that. Someone had to take care of that. And those were the other members of the tribe of Levi. The tithes supported the women and the children, and surely the women and children were not priests. The majority of the men were not priests. And judging them by other people, many of them were not saved, but were unsaved children of the devil. But all of them, the good and the bad, were supported by the tithes of the other tribes. If there was anything at all certain, it is certain that the tithes were not for the temple service. Now, we have no idea where, then in the days of the temple, where these things were stored. Same situation. Okay? Now, with the travels of the children of Israel, that storehouse had to be packed up and moved along with everything else. The tithes that were cattle and sheep and goats and all of that, it had to be moved as well. Are you getting the idea that this was not a simple scenario? But it was a very complex situation. So the priest, yes, the priest had to do the tear down of the Holy of Holies. They had to take care of that, because only the priest could carry the Ark of the Covenant. Okay? No one else could touch it. They didn't touch it either. It was carried by poles that were run through rings on each side. Okay? You remember the incident in the Old Testament. King David wanted to move the Ark of the Covenant back into Jerusalem, and he tried to do it on a cart, and as they went across a threshing floor, the cart jostled, and the ark looked like it was going to come off, and one of the men put his hand on it to steady it and dropped dead. Remember that? Well, that scared everybody. It wasn't being moved like it was supposed to be. So then after they did some more research, then they found out how it should be moved, the way God intended for it to be moved. But if they were busy doing all of that, then someone had to take care of everything else. All right, so you got questions 90 and 91.
Yeah, Brother Joe.
Yes, sir.
Also, with the tithing, they didn't get to choose what part of the animals. They had to count out 10, whatever it landed on. They couldn't switch it. And if they did, they were to pay more of a percentage on top of that. It was, like I said, 1, 2, 3, 4. If it was the best of it, that's exactly what they had to give.
Yep.
Every 10th one.
Yes.
Touch it, yes.
All right. Anybody tell me, except Brother Bernie and Jamie, anybody tell me what tithe means?
Tenth.
Should have excluded you too. Well, a tenth, yes, a tenth. That's what a tithe is. Now, since the tithe was of the law, are we commanded to tithe?
Nope.
We're not? Well, then why do we?
Out of the goodness of our own hearts.
That really wasn't the answer I was looking for.
It's when you should have expected them.
From you, yes. Yeah, if you had another answer, what would it be? Why do we today, in the late church age, why do we tithe? Or do we tithe? It's awful quiet in here.
I've said my piece.
Well, we do it because of the principle that is laid down in the law. We are not bound by the law, but the Lord blesses you when you make it a priority to tithe, give a tenth of everything that He has given to you.
All right. Now we could extrapolate on that to the nth degree. Principally, the tithe was put into place before there was ever a nation of Israel. Abraham set the pattern when Lot was taken from the Jordan River Valley. You remember that? And he was kidnapped by these other kings, and Abraham probably would not have done anything had not Lot been in that midst. But Abraham took his own army, his trained servants, and he went after them and brought everything back.
Right.
He only kept what was needed. Okay? Abraham gave a tithe, the scriptures indicate to us, of all that he had. Who did he give it to?
Melchizedek,
Melchizedek,
king of Salem.
king of Salem, which later became known as Jerusalem. Okay? So the principle of tithing was established long before the time of Moses and the law was given. During the law age, I guess you call it that, they were commanded to tithe. The reason that they was for the support of the tribe of Levi. And as we just saw, the tribe of Levi gave up their inheritance of land in order that they could be full-time in service to the Lord. Okay? So, now they had their own, later on they had their own cities, all right? They were able to grow their own stuff and this kind of thing. But their full-time job was in the service of the Lord, either in a tabernacle or a temple. Okay? All right. So then, we are not commanded to tithe, but it's a good guideline to have. And the principle is there for us to follow. Many things that are in the law All right? And in the Old Testament, per se, we don't have to go by them. But if you examine them, you will find that those were pretty good principles then, and they're good now too. Okay? We don't have to, but it's good if we would. You take the dietary part of the law. God told the children of Israel that if they followed His commands concerning the dietary things, they would not be afflicted by the diseases that were rampant in that day and time. Okay? Well, if you examine those are some pretty good things for us to follow today if we would. Okay? How they treated each other. Man, if we would follow the principles that God gave to the children of Israel, I doubt that we would have all the problems that we have today. We're not commanded to. Maybe that's the problem. We're not forced to follow those things, and so the majority of people do not want to. All right. So free will offerings were brought to the temple. Now you notice how that Dr. Bogart is going back and forth with the temple and the tabernacle. The reason is the majority of things applied to both. Okay? Applied to both. The biggest difference is the tabernacle was mobile and the temple was permanent. But the sacrifices, the items, the procedures, and offerings and everything else remained the same. All right? So the free will offerings only were brought to the temple, and then the priest received a part of these free will offerings. You see that? Just a little bit. No one else received these free will offerings, but just the priests. All right? 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 13 and 14. Do ye not know that they which minister about holy things live of the things of the temple, and they which at the altar are partakers with the altar? Even so hath the Lord ordained that they which preach the gospel should live of the gospel. Now, when an offering was brought for sacrifice, the priests were allowed to take a portion of that sacrifice. Say if a bull was brought as an offering, a big old monster, many of them were. Well, the priests were allowed to have part of that offering. Okay? They were allowed to have part of that bullock for the offering. But it was only the priests, because they were the only ones that tended to the altar. Okay? And they were all the ones that were on the inside. All right? The words "even so" in the next line mean in exactly that way. Those who preach the gospel shall live of the gospel. The priests received a part of the free will offerings of the people. The part of the free will offerings that the priests were to get is seen in Deuteronomy 18, verses 3 through 8. Now I want to pause before I go into that. Are churches commanded to support the pastor financially? No, they're not. Here again, we have an exception to a principle. The principle is that a church should do their best to support the pastor or anybody else that's part of the church that works full time, as we would say, in the ministry. But that's not always possible. We are a very small church. We pay our pastor, yes, but it's not enough for him to live on, just a pastor's salary. So he has to work, or he has to have some source of additional income. What is the exception? Why would this be okay? Well, Paul himself is the example. Paul was a tent maker. And there were times that Paul had to use his trade to make a living, to support himself, while he was doing the Lord's work. Okay? That's how that he met, I believe he met Priscilla and Aquila. And he worked in business with them in tent making. So, and Paul talks about this, what, in Corinthians? I can't remember exactly where the reference is, but Paul talks about this. There were other times that he was supported adequately enough, he didn't have to use his trade. Okay? So, it is an excellent principle to go by. Okay? All right? Let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 18. And this shall the priest do from the people, from them that offer a sacrifice, whether it be ox or sheep, and they shall give unto the priest the shoulder, and the two cheeks, and the maw. The first fruit also of thy corn, of thy wine, and of thine oil, and the first of the fleece of thy sheep shalt thou give him. For the Lord thy God hath chosen him out of all thy tribes, to stand to minister in the name of the Lord, him and his sons forever. And if a Levite come from any of thy gates out of Israel, where he be sojourned, and come with all desire of his mind unto the place which the Lord shall choose, then he shall minister in the name of the Lord his God, as all his brethren the Levites do, which stand there before the Lord. They shall have like portions to eat, beside that which cometh of the sale of his patrimony. There's a lot in those verses. So the exact amount the priest should get is specified. And this came in addition to his guaranteed living that was for all Levites. This that the priest received from the offerings at the altar was in addition to his patrimony. And this is from the passage there in Deuteronomy. What he received as part of the Levitical tribe was called the priest's patrimony. Okay? So all of this that we read in Deuteronomy there, all of this was in addition. This was, no one else received it. Okay? This was the priest only. And it was specifically for his service to the Lord. Because he was full-time. Okay? He didn't have time to raise any sheep. He didn't have time to raise any cattle. He didn't have time to grow a garden. Okay? Now, many of the other Levites did. But he could not because he's already busy. They had no land given to them. However, when they entered the land of Canaan, they were given, the Levites were given certain cities scattered through the land. And with those cities and their suburbs, they did have enough to grow gardens and this type of thing. But no, they didn't have the room like the other tribes did. Okay? And they wouldn't have enough to make a living, let's put it that way. There would not be enough for them to make a living at. All right? It would be in supplement to what they were receiving. But the priest wouldn't even have time to do that. All right? This passage of Scripture in 1 Corinthians 9, 13, and 14 is used by those who would bind tithing on us by law. But it teaches the exact opposite. It does not say, do you not know that the Levites are supported by tithes? Even so, the preacher should be supported by tithes.
Right.
But it says the priests receive part of the free will offerings. And even so, those who preach the gospel should receive a part of the free will offerings of the people. Some churches in latter days, I guess you would say, whatever that the offering was taken up on each Sunday, the pastor received the part of it, sometimes the majority of it. There may be other ways that pastors were supported. I remember as a boy, when my dad was pastoring, I remember us receiving all kinds of things, groceries, eggs, other kinds of food, because there wasn't enough money to go around. Yes. So, we don't do that today, but, that was part of supporting the pastor back then. You did what you had to do to support him. And we do what we have to do today. All right? Go to tithing, a good rule for giving. Dr. Bogard writes, I certainly am not opposed to anyone giving a tithe of his income if he tithes of his own free will and not by law. Most of us should give much more than a tithe. And with many of us, tithing is entirely too little. But whether we give a tithe or more than a tithe, it must not be by law, for we are not under the law. That law that contained tithing has been done away. Colossians 2, verses 14 through 17. The example used by Paul in urging the support of the ministry was not tithing, but the free will offerings received by the priests. Even so, preachers should be supported by the free will offerings. Now, we give, most of us give a tithe plus an offering many times. And then the pastor is given X number of dollars. It's set amount. Well, we don't make a distinction today between tithes and free will offerings. Now, our treasurer is here. You don't know the difference between the two, do you, Susan? Because there's not a distinction, okay, well, I give this as my tithe and this is a free will offering. No, it don't work that way these days. When that money or checks are put in there, she doesn't know whether it's a tithe or a free will offering. It's not her business and not anybody else's business for that matter. Because we give it not because we're compelled to, but we give it because we love the Lord. All right? The tabernacle is a type of the church. And since the tabernacle was not the storehouse, it follows that the preachers who persistently demand that the people bring their tithes to the storehouse are entirely mistaken about the church being the storehouse. Remember I told you a while ago, I didn't like that term. Storehouse tithing. Storehouse tithing. Ew. The people should not be scared into bringing their contributions to the church, thinking that the church is the storehouse. Now, we got a safe in there, but I guarantee you there's not much in it that stays there, if any. Right, Susan? She takes it out and she deposits it into the bank. It's not allowed to build up for a whole month or more. Okay? It's not stored there. It may be temporarily, but our treasurer is responsible for taking that and putting it where it needs to be, in the checking account for the church. Now, I realize this was different than it was back even maybe 15, 20 years ago. Okay? But still, this is not the storehouse. The Jews had a storehouse somewhere to bring their tithes to for the support of the Levites. But the New Testament churches have no central storehouse. If you want to give to the Lord, well, you don't have to bring it here. I mean, when we were not able to meet, many of us, we found a way to continue giving. And we didn't stop giving, okay? Even though we were not here. But the normal way of, quote unquote, normal way of giving is to bring our offerings and we put it in here when the offering is taken. In our case, on Sunday morning. Okay? And then the treasurer does what needs to be done with it. Under the New Testament plan, each man has his own storehouse. And he is his own storekeeper. You catch that? The church is not the storehouse. Okay? Upon the first day of the week, let every one of you lay by him in store, as God hath prospered him. In other words, every week, Paul is encouraging the New Testament saints to set aside that portion that they are going to be giving to the Lord. All right? They don't have to bring the whole thing down here and then divide it up and then carry it back. No. It's none of your business what I make. It's none of my business what you make. Although mine's pretty easy to figure out, but the principle is we give of what the Lord has provided for us. All right? Note it says each individual, every one of you, should, on Sunday, first day of the week, lay by him in store, not make the church a storehouse, but each one should lay by him in store. Each man should have his own store, be his own storekeeper. That is, under the Christian dispensation, each man and woman should systematically lay by him in store each Sunday, so there will be money on hand all the time for the Lord's work. We are not Jews and are not under the law given specifically to the Jews. The book of Hebrews was written for the purpose of explaining the tabernacle and all the ceremonials connected with it. And it will be impossible to understand Hebrews as written by Paul unless we know the facts connected with the temple service. Dr. Bogard says, I have used the words tabernacle and temple interchangeably in this discussion because that is what we see in the Bible, in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And that brings us to questions 97 through 100. Now, I'm going to stop for this evening. When we get into these 7 sacrificial offerings, which we will cover next week, Lord willing, you need to have your Bibles available and handy because we are going to be using them quite a bit. I want us to look at these offerings. Hopefully we'll get finished next week. But I want us to look at these offerings. I have my doubts. And to see what they are. Because I seriously doubt that the majority of us have really taken a look at these offerings and why they were. I know I haven't, as just taking the separate ones and looking at them. Okay? But that's what I want us to do, so that we will understand more about it and why these offerings were types of the suffering of Christ. So that's next week. Maybe the next 2 weeks. We'll see. Brother Bernie, would you dismiss us, please, sir?
Father, it has been good to be here tonight, and I give you praise for that. Thanks so much for loving us and caring for us and providing the needs that we have. I thank you for that. I pray as we prepare ourselves for Sunday that you will give us a heart and a mind that's willing to hear your word and what's going to be said Sunday. Father, help us not to take the freedom we have in America lightly. Father, help us to be what you would have us to be in a country that's in turmoil. Thanks so much for loving us. All these things, give you praise in Jesus' name.